Thanks for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it on this beautiful night. So I'm Beth Fenstermacher. I'm with the City of Concord Community Development Department, and with me is Jay Burgess, our Public Properties Division Supervisor, Director, Superintendent. Yeah, he's in charge of the public properties. And we're here tonight with our consultants from VHB. I'll let them introduce themselves in a second, but just wanted to lay the groundwork. We're in the early stages of planning for Bicentennial Square. We'll talk a little bit about the deficiencies and things that we definitely have to fix. But we wanted this opportunity to look at it holistically in the future. What do we want this square to be? If it's something that we want to keep the same, then that's one thing. But we want to hear from you of what you want us to do moving forward. So this is the first stage. We have some ideas we'll talk through with you tonight to get a direction to head in. And then we will be looking for grant funding to help pay for this. So the grant schedule would be we'd apply next year, and then it would be a 6-month process through that, and then another 6 month for go through that whole process. So construction or any additional design work would probably not happen for another year or two, but this is the necessary groundwork for us to lay at this point so we can move forward and seek those funds. It's currently not in the CIP. So that would be something, if it is something we move forward with and go after grant fundings, it would be added in as a project in the out years, 2028 or 27. We'll see as we move forward what funding becomes available. So with that, I am going to pass it on to Eric from VHB. They'll talk through the presentation tonight. We'll have opportunities for questions, but I think if you're okay, people interrupting with questions as we go through, just raise your hand. And then afterwards, we'll walk around. We have some concepts out here. We want you to kind of vote. It's our signature democracy where we like people to put stickers on stuff they like so we can go back and figure out what people want to see. None of these are, this is what we're going to do. These are different ideas laid out of kind of a group of things that we can bring together with the best decisions we can make for the square. So I will pass it on to Eric.
Thank you, Beth. Again, I'm Eric Bednark. I'm a landscape architect with VHB, joined by Josh Lemieux, who's also our assistant designer and helped a lot with all the graphics and the presentation. I'm again a landscape architect. I've been doing this for 30 years, and it's a really pleasure to be able to be invited here to help you, the community, help create a vision for the square. And I think that's really important to understand where we are at in the process, as Beth mentioned. This is the schematic design visioning process that we're in right now. Anything that you see in this presentation is not final. This is an opportunity for us to share ideas with you, get feedback from you, which is going to be critical to help try and shape what this could be for the future. So as we get into the presentation, a few things we're going to talk about, just kind of highlight a little bit of the existing conditions, a little bit of the history about the square, local context, what we've assessed from our site analysis. Again, we have other team members that are part of this team as well. SW and Cole did some geotechnical studies of the soils out there. We also have Du Bois King, who's our lighting consultant, sharing some information just about from an electrical standpoint, and then of course VHB is handling landscape architecture, civil engineering, and also some survey work. So we'll share some of our ideas from our site analysis and our assessment. Talk a little bit about the opportunities and constraints and some of the concerns that we've identified, and also project goals. And again, we'd love to hear from you what your goals or what your thoughts are about the square as well. Look at some precedent imagery, or what are the inspirations that we started to research, work with the city, and what are some neat ideas that you see a lot of the images over on the back table as well, which will be important for your input on what you see in the square as well. And then we'll just go over these 3 concepts that we have speckled throughout the room here as well. So in those 3 concepts, we have a base concept, which is more of our kind of basic approach with more minimalistic impact to the square. Then we have the 2 enhanced design options over off to the right here that I'm talking about. And then Beth will follow up with the next steps in this process, and we'll get into more Q&A comments. So just a little bit about the history. Some of you may know a lot about this, but just looking all the way back pre-1976, the square was just primarily used as more automobile use, not so much geared towards pedestrians, service vehicles and so forth, as it's been, having the businesses all around the edges of the square, being able to service those businesses. And then come 1976, that's when the first kind of original design came about. see here that incorporated the fountain, the stairwell in the middle of the plaza, some of the outcroppings. And then in 2006, there was another update to the design where that's where our artistic sculpture came into play here, and a lot of the other different elements, rock formations, plantings. We have a lot of granite, the artistic granite turtle, some other granite play tables, and so forth. And so there's these enhancements that have happened over a period of time. And it's something we want to recognize, that historical aspect of it, along with how the storytelling currently happens with this river trail path motif that cuts through the plaza as well. And so want to take all these elements, really recognize them and see how they can be incorporated in the future. We'll get into that in a minute. But how some of them may impact the site in kind of a negative way too. So we want to kind of recognize that as we look at different design concepts.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Could you just circle with your laser the pocket park on the drone?
The pocket park, you mean?
Well, it's the bullet. Under 76.
Oh, under here, the pocket
Yeah, yeah.
park, meaning here, right here?
I don't know. That's a question. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
sorry,
all
yes,
I'm saying.
yes.
And the shelter, what's the shelter removed?
So the shelter removed, there used to be, back in the old design, there was a small shelter right here, and it was replaced with the artistic stone sculpture.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out, appreciate that. So there was a little steel shelter, a little shade, plastic shade covering over it in that location. And those have become important to really understand why they're there and why they could potentially be moved, and how that functionality of the square would be impacted by shifting those things around in a positive fashion. So we'll continue moving forward. So as we look at the greater context, you see the square is sandwiched in between Warren Street to the north, Pleasant Street to the south, and then connected by Oddfellows Ave, which is primarily a service road, although a lot of people use this as well for different uses. We have Central Ave to the east side of the square, and then Market Lane also to the south. The interesting part of this, as I mentioned, is a lot of service vehicles that come in and out of here, other vehicles as well. So one of the tricks here is we have a lot of pedestrians using the space, we have a lot of vehicles using the space. So how do we intertwine them together? We'll talk about that a little bit more. We also have this really interesting connection, which is the pedestrian passage through the buildings, which is really interesting because it's our only connection to North Main Street. And so that's really, really important. And as much as it's a very small, kind of closed entrance, it can be a little scary probably at nighttime and so forth, even during the day, it's a little shady and dark. How can we try and activate that and really make the connection, whether it's visually or physically over North Main Street. And then of course we have the businesses around, which add a whole different dynamic to the space, because they can use the space, they directly use the space, as we know. And then again, how do you mix all the different uses for vehicles, pedestrians, the businesses, and so forth. And again, just some of the circulation and site analysis. Again, vehicles in red, pedestrians in green. It's hard to see a little bit of the orange, but just pointing out the property lines to really understand kind of what we're dealing with. We have kind of the central square area in the center here, but then we have the public right-of-ways, as we talked about, where all the vehicles use the space, and they straddle the space. So you have vehicles coming in and around the entire pedestrian space. And so how do we deal with that, which is a neat challenge to deal with. And then we have all the entrances in the black triangles, egresses from the different buildings, accessing into the plaza, just identifying those and how people move through the space. And then we of course have a water feature. How do we handle that from a more base design approach or from a more enhanced design approach, which we'll talk about in the concepts. The paint, recognizing some of the steeper slopes are changing grade. So that's one of the other challenges, is that we have two terraces in the plaza. We're up high about 3 to 4 feet from here down to there. So currently, ADA accessibility doesn't exist within the park. So the only way somebody can get around in wheelchairs is all the way down here through Market. And that's a relatively steep, uncomfortable slope, and it just forces people to go out of their way to transition down to the lower terrace where they can go down when And then we have different areas that people can't access. So you have this little terrace here above the fountain where it's just all stairs. There's no ADA ramp allowing any user with any wheelchair who can't access that spot either. So that's something we're really looking at closely. And the tree analysis, we looked at this closely as well. That was done by the New Hampshire Urban Community Forest Program. And what it comes down to is a lot of the trees are in rough shape for whatever reason. We have Bradford pears in here that are probably one of the worst trees. They fall apart very easily, branches break. They're very dangerous trees. A lot of trees have wounds, or they've been impacted via the paving, or lifting, or sinking paving, which creates a very unstable travel or path to be able to travel onto. We trip. It's harder for ADA people as well to travel through the paving. Some of the trees obviously are really close to the buildings. The root systems can impact some of these older building foundations over time. So as much as we love trees and we want to save as many as possible, they offer shade and so forth. But when we look at the long-term sustainable approach to the square, we want to make sure these things last for the next 40 years. And so as much as we do like how big they are and so forth, some of these are really, over the next 10 years could certainly disappear. And if we had to remove them at that point, it's going to create a really mess with the paving and everything else. So we'll get into the design in a minute. So we just looked at primary concerns, or what we call opportunities and constraints, from defining the identity of the space, unifying the experience within the space, how the overall square is fractured. There's different spaces and different movements. It makes it hard for people to identify and really kind of be comfortable with the overall square, and then ensuring kind of a calm and safe place to be. And these are four things that we look at. We'll look at a little bit more detail and how they actually impact the space and how we want to respond. So when it comes to refining the program and defining identity, the square does have this particular appearance to it that we can identify with. But how can we look at the future and really create a square that we can all appreciate by identifying the history, by looking at the different activities that happen within the square, the festivals, and then what other activities that we can introduce into the square and really be inclusive and make this more vibrant. How can kids become a little bit more active? We know in the past that the square has been used for different activities for children. But really looking at all the different seasons as well and how we can make it active and just a lot more vibrant and bring a stronger identity to it. Bringing in timeless material. So we think, and if we could jump forward 30, 40 years from now, how would the square feel and look then from what it does now? You can see that it has this outdated appearance now, but if we utilize really nice material, whether it's granite, certain types of pavers, and elements throughout the square that will really carry this nice design theme for the next 30, 40 years, it can really make a nice impact. And then bringing that storytelling and theming. So when we look at the trail path here that's engraved in the paving, it's really kind of hard to identify. You see it going through the paving, but you can't really read the medallions that are in there. They've been worn out. And so how can we take additional theming in the future and incorporate it into the new design that will sustain long term? It won't get worn out, but we can still tell the story of the square and other contextual elements that impact the city of Concord. Establishing identifiable gateways. So we talked a little bit about the gateways over at Warren Street and Pleasant. If you're not familiar with the square, it'd be really hard to find it. So if you're traveling along Pleasant or Warren and you come across a really nice gateway, how can we treat that to make sure that people understand that they're arriving at a special place? So that's another thing we're looking at closely as well. Go to the next slide. And establishing a unified experience. So again, it's inclusive of all users, what makes a really positive and impactful urban space. And so by enhancing circulation, dealing with the stairs here, how do we make sure that all users can be able to transition through the space effectively? De-emphasize service areas as much as it's very important to the overall space. How do we make it so it doesn't feel vehicle, it feels more pedestrian-like? So those things that you'll see, and we'll get into the design concepts and how we treat that. We talk about site-wide accessibility, but also harmonizing access and programming. So we look at this, how does everything kind of flow together, from paving themes to where materials are located, how people get directed and circulated through the space will become really important. Again, we'll highlight those in some of the design concepts. And connecting fractured spaces, I mentioned that before. So right now, when you look at all these little green blobs, it's like you have these different little pockets, and then they're broken up by these rock formations. And so there's really no open space for flexibility of use. So again, you have the different festivals, you have the different activities that are happening here, and they kind of get broken up by all these different vertical elements. You have the granite turtle, you have all these granite seat slabs in there, bollards, planters. There's just a really strong mix of all different elements, which really create this kind of fragmented and kind of confusing look to the overall space. There's no cohesive connection between all the different materials and elements that are in there. So you look at this right here, you have bollard, granite, brick, stone, lights. You have a lot of things going on in here. So we want to try and see how we can simplify that to unify the overall space. And then calming and safety. Of course, when we create an urban space like this, we want it to feel safe. We want people to feel like they're entering something that they can really appreciate. They're comfortable in the space. And so how do we do that? And by obviously identifiable edges. Really, we talked about the circulation with vehicles, really identifying how that works and how it relates to the central core of the pedestrian space. And then by utilizing different paving schemes, and then effective lighting, of course, you'll see some impressive images that kind of define how we look at lighting. And also different security bollards help with creating safety for vehicles and pedestrians, keeping them separated and safe. And some of the project goals, again, creating a vibrant, passive park with a clear identity, shared primary path or square for all users, establish easily identifiable gateways, reorganize elements to maximize usable space, and formalize edges and define spaces. And again, we'll get into how the concepts respond to those goals. So of course, we always look for inspiration from different images, different places. It helps us to work with the city to really look at a vision and then work with you and share these images to see what your thoughts are and how you would like to see the square. So we look at all different paving, different seating, whether you want more kind of contemporary look to the square, a little bit more rustic and period, really playing off the brick elements of the square. So how do those play and how do they affect the overall space? And when we look at common safety, and we talk about lighting, how can lighting be incorporated into seating? This is a really interesting picture with the exception of the glare of the light here. But this is a really important picture. It creates a really nice mood. You can see how your eyes adjust very easily to this picture. It's because there's not a lot of glare with the exception of this. And this is something we take into high account when designing lighting in various spaces to really not create this glare, especially for elderly folks. It's hard for their eyes to adjust, so we're very cognizant of that. But when you see the lighting down low, it glows the base of the ground, and then you can do some nice accent on trees where you light up the trees, and then you have the low lighting down below. It lights the ground, and then you add catenary lighting. As we all know, catenary lighting is it's almost magical. It draws you. You see a lot of breweries that have them. A lot of residential homes have them. I have them in my backyard. I just love it. There's something about catenary lighting just creates a certain mood in space. And so there you'll see in the designs how we show you can integrate them into how the tree layout is, and also how do we integrate it into water features that really can enhance the mood of the space. And we'll talk a little bit about getting that draw from North Main Street as well. And of course, security bollards can be used both for security, but it also can add lighting as well and define those vehicle corridors. So again, we talked a little bit about timeless and refined and cohesive, the different materials that would really initiate that thought. Some people do use these type of slats here, whether they're composite, wood, what have you, or concrete, or granite. You'll see a lot of people using these these large slabs, whether it is concrete or granite, and then putting slats on top of them. And the neat thing about that is they're extremely durable, but they also respond to all different users. You know, again, when you look at the square here, there's really not a lot of places for elderly folks to sit, relax, or anybody for that matter. You can go to the different cafes and sit at tables, but there's nothing really within the park. You can sit on a rock or a piece of granite, you can sit on a turtle, but there's really not comfortable seating. So we do want to look at that stuff that's going to be able to sustain over a long period of time. Again, being able to have flexible seating. Base option offers that, where there's really no controlled seating like these, where you can then, introduce some flexible seating. You see this in New York, that's very famous in some of the parks, where they just put out all the metal chairs and everybody just moves them around. It's extremely effective. Obviously, some they might get stolen, what have you. There's some concern about that, but it is an option. Yeah, sure.
Relating to the seating, who owns the chairs and tables? In other words, like there's the ones that Granite State Candy says this is only for our store, but BC doesn't say that for the ones in front of them, and I'm a little confused about is it all public seating and anybody can use them, or is it true that it only belongs to certain stores?
Yeah, I don't know if Beth, you can answer that.
Yeah, I think that's so they pay a permit from the city to have the seating there, and I think Brothers Cortado opens it up for public, but they do pay for those. And same with Granite State. So they're given a permit from the city to have those seating out there, but it's their furniture.
Okay.
And reimagine and recycle. Again, I mentioned earlier in the presentation about there's some really interesting elements within the square. We don't want to forget that. We don't want to turn our back to that. We want to maintain the history and what people are familiar with. So certain things we love to keep. We love the turtle. These rock formations are really, really cool. We may not want to include the whole entire rock formation because it takes up a lot of space. It's very hard for ADA folks to move around the paving, but we can utilize this with a water feature. We can place this stone somewhere strategic, use the turtle strategically, utilize those very effectively, but also utilize new elements too. So when we talk about a water feature, how can we use that effectively, but also do storytelling. So if you look at a granite wall, there's stuff that we can incorporate in the granite wall, tell stories, integrate it with this nice water feature, but also lighting as well. You look at mood lighting with water features, can be extremely effective. And one thing I do want to mention with water features is we always look at them from a safety perspective. You look at some of these that have standing water where children can get into. We don't want any of that. It would all be more like a dry fountain scenario where you have riverbed stone, water falls directly through the stone into a subsurface containment system and gets recycled. So that there's really no standing water. But you still get that nice, pleasant noise from the trickling of the water, which is really nice in this particular square. Play features too. Misters, we talked a lot about this and like how can we incorporate something that's fun for children but not getting involved with trying to deal with recycling water, the whole health concerns with recycling water and children getting into water and getting sick or whatever it might be. But this is a nice alternative where it can be a nice feature for children just to walk through misting. You don't need all the recycling filtration systems for these things, but it's an option as a nice feature in the middle of the square, and you can do it more decoratively. This is an interesting plaza here where they have these vertical kind of steel sticks and they just shoot mist out of them. The kids play around them. So that's something else that can be potentially integrated in the middle of the square. Another ideas with different paving schemes. We'll look very closely at how trees can thrive in here and how they can be planted effectively, whether tree grates are used, whether there's subsurface type of planting mediums. Permeable paving as well can be a nice option to be able to handle stormwater throughout the whole square. One of the issues I recognize is you have some of these really large scuppers or downspouts that leak right into the square, and you see water traveling across the square, and so you have this slip and fall type of scenarios that freeze and thaw the water as well. So how can we really remove water very quickly throughout the square very effectively? Again, different playful seating can also be used, and again, storytelling, whether it's through signage or incorporating incorporating into different elements that I mentioned before, the granite, the fountain, and so forth. So as we get into the concepts, again, just want to reiterate, again, these are concepts, ideas, and we work with the city to take all these different ideas, our site analysis, and start to formulate some different ideas. And this is where your input will be really, really important. As Beth mentioned, we have all the dots. We have the different markers here. And if you can mark these up with the dots, green representing that you really like the idea, blue would be that you like it, and red would be that you really dislike the idea. So if you could go around either the pressing images or the different concepts and provide that feedback, that would be really, really helpful. But we did start off with this base concept design. This would be more the minimalistic approach, although there's a lot that would still be done. We know the paving out there is very uneven, it's very outdated, so all the paving would get removed and replaced. And so that could be potentially permeable paving, as I just mentioned, to be able to handle stormwater throughout the whole plaza without getting involved with all these really heavy drainage structures. And that would also help where I talked about the differentiation between vehicle movement and pedestrian movement. You can see how the paving can change with different vehicles move through the space, but then the central core has some type of other type of paving. And don't be kind of caught up in the colors. It's just something we did graphically to represent a different type of paving color scheme here versus the central core. But you can see different ideas of different paving schemes throughout the present images. But some of the elements here would remain, which would be the water feature would stay the same. It would just get rehabbed over. So you get a facelift. So for instance, you have brick water falling over the spillover here, and this brick with mortar joints is not necessarily the best construction technique for a water feature because the water eventually makes its way down into the joints of the brick and starts to break it apart, as has been happening over the decades. The whole trough would get revamped, all the plumbing, electrical, and we introduce all new different materials, again, falling into that timeless appearance, whether we use granite or other materials to really give it a nice upgrade. Introducing all new trees, these kind of bosca trees that line each edge of the plaza, kind of defining the central space here, bringing in potentially some new trees along Oddfellows. So when you look down Oddfellows, you see a lot of just trees going down. It just looks like a really nice corner, rather than more of a vehicle travel way. The other key element here is introducing ADA accessibility. So we introduce this ramp structure here that kind of fits and nestles right into the overall design, keeping the same patios at Margaritas. We just introduced this nice little green strip with the ADA ramp that works out perfectly, extending down from the upper terrace down to the lower terrace. And this is where you see all the different seating that could be speckled throughout the plaza. This flexible open option. And what's nice about this, again, is the space can be used for a lot of different activities. So people can conjugate here for different, whatever it might be, things that go on in the city. People can meet here. There's plenty of open space. They can intermingle with all the different trees in here. Again, bringing flexible seating, but it's very flexible and open. And of course, introducing some plant material to soften the utility building that's in there, trying to soften that view a little bit. And then other treatments to define the service ways would be bollards and lighting to increase that safety for pedestrians, the different outdoor cafe sitting areas. And again, catenary lighting can be introduced in any one of these designs, whether it's intertwined with the trees, and create a really nice mood setting in the house.
Question.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You could, as long as I've been here, the two areas that I don't quite represent, Central Avenue and Oddfellows Avenue. So if you could point out, and maybe it futuristically, put a few landmarks on the outside of that, like Coronado Brothers Coffee, Margaritas, just a shadow of where it is. Kind of, is Oddfellows in Central, is that really the paved walkway that is periodically used by service vehicles?
Oddfellows is, I would call it the the main road through the square is the most direct between Pleasant and Warren. It's the one-way street that goes from kind of where Granite State Candy is in front of Brothers Cortado and then exits on Pleasant Street. So the fountain, if you walk down Oddfellows, the fountain would be on your left. Central Ave is kind of almost the alley between the back of what used to be the camera store and Margarita's. It's there's a dumpster back there, and then the other one is the
Market.
Market.
Lane,
That's
yeah.
over by the utility transformer, the utility transformer.
The school street garage is to the left of Warren Street.
Yeah, it's on the other side of Warren Street.
But I'm still having a hard time putting this in geographical perspective. So not this evening, but futuristically, I think it would help a lot of people.
If it helps you, Brothers Cortado's right here, Granite State Candy's right here,
And this is
for the purposes of tonight.
the south page, page south would be the higher part of the plaza, and then the page north would be the lower elevation part of the plaza.
And this is that alleyway right here that extends down to North Main Street. And so when we do look at, I mentioned Central Ave, this is kind of our, when we talked about de-emphasizing kind of service vehicle accessibility. You walk down there, and I'm sure a lot of you know it's you have your trash down there. There's different things that just sit out here. It's not as attractive as we would like it to see, but it is more of a primary service access point. So that's why we really stressed doing some type of gateway entrances at the Warren Street entrance, at Oddfellows, and then also at Pleasant Street, and really kind of de-emphasizing this as much as we can. So that's why you see gray paving here, where as you enter down here, it starts to get into the more ornate paving, announcing that you're in and arriving to this nice plaza area. So, so when people are walking here, someone that may be new to the community, they'll look down and say, if it doesn't look too attractive, or it doesn't look like a really friendly place, we would want to see them go and enter into the square here, or obviously through the overhang here at Margarita's and enter into the plaza that way.
And just to clarify, those are public roads, so they will remain public roads. We say service, but for those businesses, they have parking available, and so there will always be cars coming through there. So that's one of the things we're trying to do, is to make it more obvious that cars should be there for those businesses, but we don't want it to be a cut through. So it's a balance of not introducing too many cars that don't have to be there. We've seen some issues, and we saw it the other day, that people are coming in and just parking in the middle of the roadway. So trying to emphasize that, just to get more information out there so people understand how the site is used, because we're not going to be discontinuing those as public roads.
Is there anything you can do about the dumpsters and stuff? Because that is really a rather nasty space there. Or is that just?
It's whose dumpsters is this? Margarita's
Or
or
solid waste.
okay, yeah.
It's all of ours. Sorry, I'm at 6 Bicentennial Square.
Okay.
And what I don't think people realize is that Oddfellows Way is the only access to our building. There is no access from behind it. So I get, it seems like a walkway, and it's like, why are you coming through here? Why do you have a dumpster? But it's like, it's our only access.
And so we don't want to take that away. We just want to tell pedestrians that you may not want to go down this. We would rather see you go here. But the people that know they need to go there, it's not a problem. They can easily access it. We talked a little bit about, there's a really strong change in grade between the roadway and the sidewalk here. Some people bottom out there. We do some improvements here just to make it a little bit easier for vehicles to get through. But really, again, de-emphasizing the use of vehicles, whether we do some type of decorative paving at the entrances, again, with this overhead structure that you drive through or walk through, announcing that gateway as well. Yes.
Yes, what are you proposing for structure to delineate the roadways? My main concern is that my building, Candy Shop building, is here on the corner.
Yep.
Right? Toward the end of that building, so as you go back south, that's where we make our deliveries.
Okay.
So having any.
So right along this edge right here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
So having any obstruction there would make it very difficult for us
Okay.
to be able to deliver things. So I understand wanting to delineate the roadway, makes sense. But to restrict access with our delivery vehicles in there will make it very difficult for us to get product.
Yeah, I appreciate that
into our
comment,
business.
and yeah, and this is just a suggestion, whether two columns in the metal structure, it could be just kind of one column, and there could be some really nice wayfinding signage that's either engraved to a vertical piece of granite, just on the one side, at least something there to announce that you're arriving somewhere special. So certainly take that into account. We would leave this still all open here. This would all be left open. We would contact, there is an existing tree that's here already. That's something we would love to continue to work with, you kind of figure out what makes sense to do and make sure you have the appropriate space. We've also recognized these different access points where these gates are here, also down here, where we need to make sure we have that access still there as well. So we try to be cognizant of that as best as we can and maintain those access points. Yes.
So with the middle gate that would be going near the corner of our building, just out of curiosity, you're trying to direct people in through the gate, but that's a roadway. So is your anticipation that people are going to be going on the sidewalk area to the side of it? Because if so, that's gonna cut directly through our seating area. They're not gonna be able to get through, there's gonna be tables.
So right in this location right here.
So
Yeah,
otherwise
so-
they'll just be walking in the road.
Yeah, so these are great comments. This is what we want to hear from you. So if there's something that we're showing on these that would certainly disrupt your business, we can certainly make different design changes that will still provide what we're trying to do here about announcing the gateway. Like I just mentioned, we could do something singular over here. We could get very creative with this. So it could be a single pillar over here with some type of metal signage that just extends out but doesn't have a second column. So there's a lot of different design ideas we can do, but I do appreciate those comments. Yes.
So right now, I think Oddfellows kind of functions as like, it's primarily a pedestrian route that people walk through, and then I think kind of secondary are the deliveries. So if it's kind of a more formalized road, are pedestrians kind of no longer allowed to use that can they walk on the road, or would that be, not in their right of way? How would that function?
Yeah, no, certainly. Again, it's the whole character, and that's why we're showing all this decorative paving all throughout the entire area, with the exception of this portion of Central Ave. We want this to all feel very pedestrian oriented. Again, if you're someone who's not familiar and you're driving around, you're like, oh, this looks like you can take a right here and go down this road here. We want them to feel like, oh no, this doesn't feel like vehicles go down here. But again, for the local businesses, people for service, those folks know that they can come down here, but it will all feel pedestrian-like. So yes, pedestrians can still travel. We want this to feel like a really nice pedestrian corridor. That will be the first goal. But then vehicles can use it very easily. But then lining the edges of it with either bollards, light fixtures, other elements, will just allow that level of safety that if you're sitting here and someone, you hear all these crazy stories about people driving into storefronts and all this kind of stuff, providing a little bit more safety than what's out there now with some of these bollards or other elements that just help protect people sitting in the cafe, give them a little assurance that they feel safe being in that space next to vehicles. They'll have that as well. But it will feel, the idea in all these concepts, that it will feel very pedestrian-like. And this is something, we talked about in one of the enhanced concepts. It's called the European Plaza type style. So when you think about some of these really well-known European plazas, they're just wide open. And vehicles can drive in and around, but they do demarcate where vehicles can travel through with flush paving, whether it's granite curbing that's flush, and you can kind of see where cars go. But it's just a really wide open plaza, and people can just go anywhere. But it feels very pedestrian. Yes.
So just adding one more comment to that, there are large trucks that go through there that, there's deliveries to Benucci's, right? So there's large trucks that go there, there are ambulances that go through there, there's lots of vehicle traffic that happens in that area. If there's any kind of like services that have to be done to those buildings, the service vehicles go through there, so you often see, and it's great. I mean, I like people being in the park, and I like people feeling like the whole place is open to be in, but I think there's this perception that the car shouldn't be there, right? Like the car you shouldn't be driving in here when in fact, I like the idea of designating the roadway, that this is in fact a roadway. Like if you're a pedestrian walking in the roadway, that's great and that's fine, but like it is in fact a roadway.
Yes.
Sorry, just to add on to that, I mean, with our delivery entrance being right there, we have people scream at people delivering at our building all the time because they don't understand it's a road. They yell at us for being in there when we're just making deliveries going through and we have every right of way to be there. So I think making it feel like a pedestrian area only, essentially, it's just gonna exacerbate that situation. And we've had people get fairly aggressive with us for being in there.
That's an interesting point. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. So it is a delicate balance. We've talked about this with Beth and Jay when we were looking at these designs, and it's like how do you do that? And it's done. Again, whether it's here, whether it's in the United States and different plazas, they also have these things called renovate. It's a Danish term for a design theory and application where you do level paving all throughout, but you define corridors for vehicles. It's something that's worldly famous. The Danish have done extremely successful, but they've defined where vehicles go, but it still has this feel of pedestrian-like. So it's definitely tricky, and I don't know if we can make that go away, because if you're experiencing it now, what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen? It's something we can certainly look at and see what we can do to try and help alleviate that.
How about just simple signage? It says service vehicles only.
Yeah.
3 words.
Well, it's a city street, so we can't do that.
Well, but
There's property that has frontage on Oddfellows Avenue.
we want to minimize the local.
There's very creative ways. You can almost get intentional, like where you actually do a different type of paving pattern here that suggests that this is a different use. You can almost, I've seen it where people engrave like service right across the, like you can engrave a big piece of the service. I know that sounds kind of a little, too intentional, but sometimes that can be effective. But you can show that this is used for something else.
I don't have a problem with it, just so long as we can continue to access our property the way, and everyone else needs to be able to continue to access their businesses, their property, so that they can continue their business. If that goes away, then we'll lose the dynamic. So there's no way that I think that the coffee place would survive.
Right.
I mean, I think they're gonna have a tough time during construction anyway, to be honest with you. So I don't know how extensive, how long it's gonna take, but I think we'll be fine, and I think some other folks will be okay, but I think everyone that really relies on this square area is gonna have a tough time when it gets closed down.
Yeah, and that's something, we'll talk to Beth and Jay. When it comes down to it, as Beth mentioned, this is something like construction's pretty far out. And it's something that we would work as a team with all our consultants, traffic folks, civil engineers. We would think through the best ways to phase that out. And of course, you would be brought into that whole process to understand what things would be happening and how we're doing it. So we've worked on some pretty complex projects, whether it's for Mass DOT, Rhode Island DOT, with really dealing with situations where how you don't impact certain uses, and it gets tricky. And I think you'll notice that there certainly would be a disruption to some level, but we would try and do that as thoughtfully as possible. But we sure would love your feedback. So if we're proposing anything in this area here, we'd love to see trees marching down Oddfellows. It'd be lovely, and I know there is an existing one. But it would, eventually when we get further into the design process, really understanding.
Smaller trees, I mean, the one that's there is too big.
Okay.
It's grown way up high and it's growing into the building now.
Yeah.
I love trees, that'd be wonderful. There's actually an empty planter now.
Yep.
It was a tree that was removed,
Yeah.
because, it was dead.
Yeah.
I had to take it out. And they didn't put one back because I said, please don't want to put one back there yet. It's gonna get too big and grow into the building again. And
Yeah, you mentioned planters, which is kind of interesting because in some cases, again, we work on a lot of plazas. We're actually looking at a plaza up in Skohegan, Maine right now, where we're talking about using flexible, movable planters that are actually on rollers. you shift them and move them around, but the intent of kind of being, you can't put a big, huge tree in some of these things here. You wouldn't be able to move them around. But that could be something interesting as well, where they kind of, again, demarcate the edge of the travel way, but they offer this aesthetic element there that can be movable and flexible. So again, as we move down the design process, these are different things we really focus in on the details and the edges, and then obviously the whole square.
Can I ask a planning question? So for you folks, after tonight, what's next? When will there be opportunity for more input?
I was going to talk about that at the end.
Yeah, at the
So
end, I
once
know
he
we.
goes through all the concepts, he's going to
Yeah.
go through 3 concepts. We'll wrap it up. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm going to shift on to the other 2 concepts, and then we're certainly open to questions. So this is what we call the European style plaza, where things start to really open up more. We can see we get rid of this outcropping of rocks and the blue spruce down here. We removed the outcropping of stones down here, opened up this whole entire area at the lower level. We shifted the ADA ramp to over here, just suggested location, with some plantings as a backdrop to this radial fountain. And where that becomes really interesting, I mentioned the little alleyway that leads out to North Main Street. If you can envision, so if you take like this granite wall here and envision this curve being a curved wall of water trickling down the face of the granite into this stone trough, and you do some type of really interesting LED lighting that makes the wall glow. And as you walk down North Main and you peek down here, you see this really cool curved glow in the plaza. You'd be like, wow, what is that? And it would start to spark some interest and potentially pull people through. Of course, maybe lighting in that little alleyway needs to be looked at as well to make it a little bit more attractive and safer feel. But there's different things to really try and create these view sheds, these elements to attract your view. Again, here, potentially introducing a central feature there, whether it is misters or whether it's something down on the ground plane. We showed in the other concept, whether it's a large piece of granite that's shaped like the state of New Hampshire or something that's more relevant to the city itself, that we can do some storytelling, tell a little bit about the history. Yes, we are getting away from this kind of motif of this river thing happening, but it's not reading as well as the original design intent was. So if we focus the storytelling to different features, or if you're sitting on these granite benches here that are speckled next to the trees, there could be some really interesting things next to the granite or in the granite as you're sitting looking down. So a lot of really neat elements to introduce the storytelling and wayfinding and so forth. Again, some of the plantings around here would help soften that bricks utility structure. This option also opens up another little space here that would complement the cafe for additional seating. That could also be shifted. We can put the turtle in there. We can put the granite game table in there that people can use, and so people aren't just stuck to this smaller strip here over at the coffee shop. So we're trying to open up some other spaces as well. But now, for like the arts festival and other activities, this becomes really open. You can fit all different tent structures here under the trees. You can see we have catenary lighting that would be intermingled with all the trees as well. Really do some neat things with the paving design as well. We can kind of really demarcate this really neat feature here. We can do storytelling along the granite band here. We can do a lot of different things here to really, when people come into the square, they actually learn what's happening. They learn about the history of the square. So a lot of stuff can either happen in the water feature or it could happen down on the ground plane. Again, the stairs would be improved, be very comfortable. The ADA ramp's very comfortable as well. Again, same treatments with the Oddfellows and Central. Just looking at different paving schemes and so forth. Again, nothing set in stone. And then of course, lighting gets all integrated into this, and that's where we wouldn't see any light poles. You see 3 light poles right in front of Margarita's here. I'm not quite sure why. But our intention is not to put any light poles in here whatsoever. So we would look at integrating lighting in a very creative way, as you saw in some of those earlier pressing images, whether it's down at the ground level, up in the trees, and other elements as well. Yeah.
How does the area that's underneath that kind of like overhang at Market Rate is whose property is that? And because we're talking about Oddfellows Way, but that's another way that people come in and access the park is through that area. I'm not sure, does that belong to the park or is that part of the building owners?
It's owned by the people that own the Margaritas building. We have a public access easement, so
Okay,
it's legal, but if for a city, we should look at city-owned property as our access way, but there is public access through there, through an easement.
yeah. Thanks.
And again, creating some of the seating. So the balance here is, we create some cafe seating over here, but then we introduce potentially some of these slabs that you could put seat slats on. So it would be like a normal seat bench mounted on top of a piece of stone. Or they could be typical benches as well. But we kind of introduce this pattern that interrelates with the layout of the trees. And when you look back at some of those present images where we had the lighting at the base of the bench that makes the ground glow. So when you're looking down on the plaza as well, it almost starts to look like this artistic formation of seating and trees that are lit down at the ground level, and then the trees lit up with the canopies. So it has this really attractive, warm glow to the whole plaza, and you start to emphasize all the vertical elements, which gives it a really interesting mood and appearance. Any questions, comments on this particular concept? Yeah.
So my background's facilities, and from a maintenance perspective, looking at all of that uplighting, that probably custom built LEDs, ground lights, overtime, maintenance, is that a concern when you're talking about having materials that are going to be there for 40, 50 years?
I mean, certainly it's something to discuss, and we would, these are all suggestions and what we've seen in other plazas and so forth, and I think it's a decision that we as a team, with the city and folks like yourself as we progress down the design process, what do we really want to incorporate, and then it's going to come down to funding and so forth. What can we actually afford to put in here? So if certain things we have to cut out, we look at other alternatives on how to supplement that. So absolutely agree with you, in the sense of giving it kind of a maintenance overview of the different applications here. But the intent is to really kind of simplify the design of the overall plaza, to get rid of all these different elements that really impact the whole use of the plaza and simplifying it. But of course, trying to introduce some of these, lighting, LEDs, it's nice because they do last for a pretty long time.
They're supposed to.
They're supposed to.
We
But
can agree that they're supposed to.
I agree in the sense of uplighting on trees. You have to really think it through. Some of the well
Just
lights
thinking through a
go
lot
out.
of the public spaces that we see, both around Concord and around Manchester, the first thing to go is those ground lights. And generally speaking, they stay down.
You're exactly right, because there are several in the square that are basically beyond repair. However, the ones on Main Street, some thought was put into the placement and the maintenance of those, so consequently, it's a little bit less of an issue. I'd like to draw that.
They're not going to be mine to repair, so.
They'll be mine, but I hear what you're saying.
But I'm worried about my tenants coming out at night
Sure.
and having it dark. If that's the only permanently fixed lighting, because your catenary lighting isn't really the same as permanent overhead lighting. Are they going to have a well-lit access to their apartments 10 years from now?
I'm understanding that safety was one of our goals
Sure.
here. That would
Yeah,
definitely be
absolutely.
part of it.
Yeah, it's a great point, because you see lights burned out, or a lot like those well lights. They're a pet peeve for me because they say they're IP68 rated, waterproof and all this, but you always see water build up. So it's like, so that's something we look at really carefully. We work with like the craft group at Gillette, and we've done a lot of stuff down there with lighting and so forth, and we monitor that closely. We've had stuff in there for well over a decade now, and it's still sustaining really nicely. We've uplight all the trees in the parking lots. We looked at snow management, all that kind of fun stuff as well. So all that will be taken into account as we progress further into the design. But it's a great comment.
I apologize, I might have missed this part. So I see all the lighting for the trees and around the fountain that you mentioned, but along Oddfellows Avenue and then also back along Market Lane, are there ideas for lighting some of these more option areas, like the Oddfellows closer to Pleasant Street? I don't see any lighting there, and it's it's an alleyway for people to be walking through.
Yeah.
I think for safety, it'd be good to have some lighting proposed to those areas as well instead of just in the park.
Yeah, so you saw that I mentioned that steel bollard that had that little light strip going around the top of it. It was one of the first present images further back in the presentation, right there. So this is where we can introduce these bollards along the edge of Oddfellows. They're high impact, like they can handle pretty significant impact to them. So they're meant to protect the buildings as surface vehicles and other vehicles travel through. But they also offer this lighting, so we can cast light down. There's other different types of lighting. This is one in particular in regards to balancing security with lighting. But we talked about with Beth and Jay about stick lighting. You have these upright stick lights that stand up anywhere from like 12, 10, 12, 14 feet tall. They're really interesting. They cast light downward. We're very cognizant of dark sky compliance. We can utilize those too with regular bollards. So we could also do regular bollards and then intermittently place them with these stick lightings. We would look at that more closely based on photometrics, because we want to make sure the lighting is a very important point in regards to safety. So eventually, when we start getting into the design process to get through permitting, we need to make sure that the photometrics, the overall lighting, is adequate. So when you look at IES and any engineering society requirements, they want a minimum of 0.2 foot candle in pedestrian spaces. Whereas maybe we try and shoot 25 because it's a highly urban pedestrian space. But that's something we would have to show the town that we're lighting this adequately. So hopefully that wasn't too long.
No, that's fine. And the placement for that I hope there'd be testing for some of it, because I know that like next to the housing building, there's an alleyway that goes behind. There's doorways that go into those buildings, so the lights are. I know Mason and Ridge, they've got that whole.
Are you speaking of this little alley right here?
Yeah, that alley, that doorway that's inside that building, the Mason and Ridge stairwell. People love to hang out and hide in those areas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is kind of like a odd fellows, but it's an odd, it's an access point. So we would look at that, and it's a good question. Like I'm assuming this is public, this little alley.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's how you get to Benucci's.
I don't know if it's public or if it's there. So if the city doesn't own it, there is opportunities to work with private property owners.
Yeah.
To work collaboratively to say, okay, this is our lighting design. Can we include you and do a partnership investment in that?
I think that's Siborowski. I think he's part of the,
Not ours.
building.
I think there's also an easement to access that electrical vault, so there's kind of a lot going on there. But I think the intent would be that it would be part of one harmonious square.
Also, so I don't know, the corner there, the building that's on the corner of Oddfellows Ave, and that one directly across Oddfellows Ave is families in transition.
Yep.
So they have lots of kids there.
Yes, we do.
And I just was wondering what the thoughts were in terms of providing some sort of play space for those kids to be. And they are accessing their buildings from that Ave, which sometimes, is not the safest place to travel if there's traffic or anything happening in there.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And again, we would demarcate the edges of the vehicle travel ways with bollards and lights and so forth. This would be almost like another nice application, as we mentioned, in regards to flexible planters, to be able to define. Now, I don't know if we would include like a play area. I don't know if that would be part of kind of the overall scope. It's kind of a minimal space, but I think it would be letting those owners know what we're doing and then saying how can we create a little bit more protective space, whether there is some type of decorative little fence that can outline this area. Maybe that could be incorporated into it.
Because in addition, also the kids from the YMCA daycare come down and they use the park to play in as well. So there are children that come in there and play during the day.
And that could also be something, as we talked about over here as well, where some type of other paving scheme happens here to define that it is another usable space. Yeah.
I was saying, Leslie said, I do get to ask questions. How are you factoring in snow removal? I mean, with all of these features, there are already a lot of features there, and I'm not sure what we do, Beth, for snow removal down there.
I'll let Jay answer that.
Again, one of the goals we had going into this, Your Honor,
I
is
mean, assuming we have snow.
right, which you'll
Give
have
it
to
a few
hit.
years.
Right now, we want to try to make it more welcoming during the off season, the winter season. And you may recollect that the way we currently remove snow is a very narrow pathway that essentially leads from the corner of the square right up through the archway. I definitely think that the plans that will lean towards reduce the amount of, I'll call them obstructions, some of the features that are currently there, and ideally that'll lead to a more robust snow removal process, so we can enjoy a larger area year round.
Great, thank you, appreciate that.
It's also interesting if we did do, I mean, we would love to do permeable paving here. What tends to happen is with permeable paving, the heat from down below grade tends to migrate up through the gravel that's underneath permeable paving and release more warmer air. And so when you typically see permeable paving, especially like UNH has done a lot of studies on this, and when you look at, if you look at some of their studies, they'll show permeable asphalt paving. And you'll see that that permeable asphalt doesn't have any snow on it, whereas the other regular asphalt does have snow. So sometimes that can help melt the snow in some cases, depending.
Have you noticed it's less durable though?
I'm sorry?
Have you noticed it's less durable though?
Permeable.
Yeah.
It's, there's,
A little bit more
there's always the other side, to maintenance and so forth. So, it's again, something that we want to look at all the options and say if it makes sense. From a stormwater aspect, if that kind of is a little bit more important than actually kind of acting with that maintenance, but it can be a high maintenance thing. Sometimes you have to clean out the joints, sometimes people vacuum out the joints of the
This
pavers.
is more capable to use for Bicentennial products too, right?
Good.
Yeah, it does require maintenance. It's a lot more maintenance intensive than a regular conventionally paved area. I think it's something we want to probably look at, but understanding that there'd be a long-term maintenance commitment, not just the effort, but the expense of the materials it would take to maintain that.
Yeah, in regards to the salt, what's nice nowadays, these unit pavers are 8,000 PSI. They're integrated colors all the way through. So when you think about like regular stamped concrete pavement, it starts to wear away. These pavers are pretty darn durable. And for instance, we did a large thing down at Wesleyan University College down in Connecticut. We have a big turnaround. Massive buses coming. It's at the athletic facility down there. And the one thing they always tout is like how this thing has not changed for the last 15 years. They get a ton of snow, a lot of activity, big buses, and it hasn't changed. And so we used a very particular detail there that helped with the drainage. We use certain pavers that interlock appropriately, but the salt hasn't affected it. Nothing's affected those pavers. They're pretty durable. But again, something else we look at closely. We can jump to the next concept. That's okay. Awesome. And so we call this the amphitheater performance concept. And the big change here, you see kind of the center of the plaza where the stairs are. It's kind of not this very formal set of stairs going down. It's kind of a set of stairs that kind of wraps around and creates almost this amphitheater to that central granite medallion that's in the center of the plaza there. And so different performances can happen here. People can just conjugate and sit on all the stairs. You can incorporate that kind of creative benching like when you see here, where you can do the slats on the concrete, or if it is all granite, you do granite and do the slats on top of it, and put the slats in very particular locations. So some people can sit on the granite, some people can actually sit or slats out with the back. So some of the older people, we can make it more inclusive. But it does create this neat little amphitheater aspect of the whole design. The other neat thing is here is the ADA ramp. It doesn't necessarily feel like an ADA ramp. It's really wide. It's like 10 feet wide. It just feels like it's part of the overall plaza. It's just an access way to get down to the lower terrace. Yes, it would have to have railings and so forth onto it because it is steeper than 5%. But it all gets really integrated nicely. You have this fountain here. So when you come down here, you come onto this very large flat landing. It's kind of an area where pedestrians can actually conjugate, hang out in front of the fountain. This is something we pictured, kind of these stones standing up, and there was a previous Preston image where the water dipped over the edge with the lighting underneath it. But we can put this rock formation in the center of this really cool fountain, have stone around it. We can either have a little bit of water that's above the stone. The reflection of these rocks can be really cool. We can bring lighting up through the water into the center here, lighting up the center of the rock. It'd be really interesting. And again, this is aligned with this here. So someone's looking down, you see these lights, these rock formations lit up, they could potentially draw their eye through here. We could add lighting to all the treads as well. We don't want to make this look like Hollywood. And so when I talk about lighting, and I talk about lighting all over the place here, it would be really dim. It would meet the lighting requirements, but as you saw in some of those pictures with the lighting, it had this really nice soft glow to it. And some of the lighting that we've done for big commercial properties, we've worked with very professional lighting consultants. It's better to go low level, more lighting, but low level, because your eyes don't need to adjust. It just stays. And so, like for instance, this is Liberty Mutual right off the Pike, where 195 and the Pike crisscross. We did the design for Liberty Mutual. We did the parking lot there. When you look off the highway, the parking lot looks dark. But when you actually go and park and you walk through it, you feel very comfortable because your eyes are not adjusting as you look up and see glare. You see a light here, a light there, and you're looking up and you look up at the light, your eyes have to adjust. As you look down into the dark area, everything's just very evenly, and this even glow to it. It's really, really cool. So when I talk about all that lighting, everything would be very, very low level. It would be very comfortable. Here we introduce these decorative poles, and so this is where it kind of comes into your idea, is, you know, if we couldn't do lighting somewhere else, or we decided we couldn't fit it in the budget, or we had to look at something else, we incorporated these posts to hang the catenary lighting. But if for some reason the catenary lighting got taken down, we can do lighting on top of these posts, infill, just in case. So you kind of think of these theater lights, where you have like lights coming off in different directions. You can do something like that to kind of create this little fun theater type of look to it. They could be a little bit more standard type fixtures. They could be the light sticks as well. We'd have to make sure they can also handle the catenary, because there was a little bit of a structural engineering aspect to it. But again, all of the trees are kind of laid out in those bosks, like all the other concepts that we proposed. We just really like how they define the edges of the plaza here, and kind of leave open the vehicle access routes to Oddfellows and Central Ave. And then we do have kind of this more centralized planting area here to soften the utility building again. Yeah, and then of course we switched up the paving color here. We know there's been some comments about not making this look very corporate looking. And so when you look at like pictures like this here, it kind of tends to look a little bit more corporate feel to it when you get into these lighter colored pavers up there. And so looking at the option of introducing a little bit darker color picture, if you could go back to that precedent with that brick paving, because it is really interesting, and it's really fitting for the plaza like this down here. You can see how there's kind of this mixture of the darker colored brick with lighter. And so you can get really creative with like actually, you know, looking at the circulation going from Warren Street down through the plaza, down through the stairs, and going through that pedestrian corridor to North Main. You can get really creative and do kind of these little speckled pavers throughout to suggest that circulation without creating this clear, like demarcated path going down to the plaza. So if you can go back to that last concept. Anybody have any comments here? Questions? Yes.
I think of the three, this one's in my opinion, the best. It feels like it's kind of same character, similar, but it's just kind of expanding the function of it. I really like it.
Yeah, and this is, out of all, this is the most open design. We did kind of play with the benches here, again, do these little L things. There's a high school down where I live did this in a huge plaza. I mean, they spent hundreds of millions on their school. And they did these really kind of neat L benches with permeable, with flexi-pave around the trees, which is a permeable rubber paving. Excuse me, that water can go down through. A lot of people do it on street applications around street trees. It's ADA accessible, but it's also flexible. You can actually cut it as tree grows. And then they did actually the lighting around the base of the benches. And it has this really kind of neat pattern to it when you look at it at nighttime. You know, this is a plaza we just did in Watertown here, where we have these L type of benches that we designed with the architects. We did have, I think this is actually crushed granite, where the tree actually is. but we have this whole pattern of these kind of creative L benches on each side of the plaza. You walk right through them. But yeah, so this offers the most flexibilities, adding like tent structures during festivals. There's a lot of space to be able to do that. Has all the same design applications that we talked about along the different vehicle corridors. And again, different options for bringing in storytelling, whether it's on the plane, the paving plane, or vertical elements in the fountain. There could be a lot of stuff that happens with the stairs as well. You can start engraving stuff in the stairs as well, again, benches. Yes.
And all this would retain the existing, like the granite sculptures and the turtle, all those pieces are still going to be incorporated. You know, I can't see them in the
Yes,
rendering,
some.
but
I would say some, because there's so many of them, it starts to create confusion. But we certainly can integrate different, so like, we can put the turtle, whether it's in the landscape, as just a visual element, or we have plenty of room to situate those elements for play for kids.
Yeah.
So I think that's also important, when we talk about inclusivity, it's not only ADA accessibility, elderly, young, teens, whatever it might be, it is all about children too, in the sense of, attracting, and that's why we brought in that little mist feature as well.
yeah, I mean, just from my perspective, I would personally the mist. I don't know for sure. Just I feel like it's a downtown park, so I wouldn't want my kids to get wet because like we're going out to lunch or whatever we're doing. I feel like if we're having another splash pad or mist, I want it in more like Rollins or Keach. But I do really like the incorporation at present of the rocks. The kids, locally, they call it the Rock Park.
Yeah.
So I feel like maintaining that identity would be a good thing. Just I mean, I think that's what most of the kids I know call it the Rock Park, and they love climbing on the structures and that big granite like split. I know it's a huge thing, but that's like an Instagram moment. When people visit me from out of town, that's where they love that picture. So I wouldn't want to lose that either.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend keeping that in future planning in some portion. It doesn't have to be the main central feature. I understand how that whole little living room rock sculpture. My kids love it. All the kids I know love it, but I see how it's not necessarily functional in the ADA perspective or for best use of the space. But keeping that in spirit in the future renderings, I would say would be a good thing. But that would be my.
Absolutely.
And then one other piece that I would also to say with the fountain, I would say that's one of my only complaint about the existing structure is that the fountain can be so loud. I don't know if we take into account the acoustics because it's such a small, echoey plaza.
Yeah.
When that fountain's on, I think sometimes people find it overstimulating. So if we are keeping a water element, I would hope it would be maybe a quieter one or just that acoustics are taken into account in future fountain use.
It's an excellent point.
Really good point,
Yeah.
because it's loud, and
It is
even
loud,
when you're
yeah.
sitting next to somebody anywhere near the fountain, you can hardly talk.
Yeah, we've designed quite a few fountains. We're doing one from Merrimack College now. We're doing a memorial fountain with a plexiglass water feature and granite walls down on the Cape. And we did something down in Virginia as well at a big convention center there. And it was really critical on how the steps in the water and how high the steps were. And they actually changed as the water trickled from different heights. So we're very cognizant of that. And it's a great point because they can be annoying.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I like the idea of the water fixture. So I'm not like get it out of there, and I wouldn't file a formal complaint about it currently. But it is, if we're changing it, I would make it quieter.
One of my teaching lessons on water and noise was it called Falling Water? Frank Lloyd Wright's in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
The reason why they actually closed, one of the reasons I'll say the reason why it's not used is because the water was so loud under the house as it trickled through the waterfall.
Yeah.
And so it was almost annoying to actually live there. But it's quite spectacular if you've been there.
Would any of this have any impact on the mural that's on the end of by the restrooms? At the end of the
Yeah. Are you talking like the mosaic?
the mosaic.
Yeah. No, I mean, right now we haven't talked about any type of verticality of walls or anything like that, with the exception of looking at what we can do to address your point about making this a little bit more friendlier, or your point, I think it was, coming in from Oddfellows, from Pleasant, looking at trying to do something along those blank brick walls there potentially would be nice, but nothing's proposed about changing anything that exists right now.
Thank
Any other comments? Yes.
I'd just like to second that point that, obviously it sounds like you can't keep all of the little architectural elements that are there, but I feel like just from living in Concord for a long time, a lot of people like the turtle and then the split rock. So I think those are the two most sentimental features of that park, so maybe maintaining those.
I know one of the images I was looking at, there was, I don't know how she fit in there, but the one with the circle, she was like jammed in
That
there.
one too, yeah.
I was like, how is she getting out of there?
Yeah, every kid in Concord has a picture of them.
But it's a great point. I really appreciate you bringing that up, because there's different things that we can do to integrate play features throughout the entire plaza. And so that's something we'll certainly look at. Any other final comments? Otherwise, I'll hand it over to Beth to close it out as the next steps.
We'll be here for a while afterwards if there's any other specific questions, so you still have an opportunity to chime in.
Yeah. And please do go up to any of these guys and write, again, green is great if you want to call it, or you really like, blue is like, and red is you just do not like. So anything you want to write on any of the boards or put the sticky dots, you're great.
Okay, so we're at step one of our, we're collecting public input. So we met with some of the abutters on Friday morning, got some really valuable input that we're sharing with VHB to include as they continue on the development of this project. Some of the things we heard loud and clear were the construction phasing and not impacting businesses. Our goal with this project is to make it a better space. It's not to impact anybody negatively. So we're going to do the best that we can through this process of how can we phase it as we're looking at different things. So that's number one, and that's the important part of public input, is to understand how people use the space, how people want to see the space used. So we have our three concepts that we've kind of narrowed it down based on information we got Friday from the butters, information we get from you all tonight, and then any trickling information that comes in after we post this video. We're going to come with a preferred alternative, and we'll kind of move forward with that. We'll probably do another public information session just to say, hey, this is what we've taken. How do we feel about this? And then the next step would be we'd go to city council and say, all right, are we ready to apply for a grant? There's Land and Water Conservation Fund available. That's originally paid for this park. So there's usually higher priority for existing LWCF properties to get funding in the next round. So that opens up in June of next year. So if city council okays it, we'll move forward with applying for the grant with the preferred alternative. It's still conceptual, but once we receive that funding, we can move forward with the next stages of design development where we actually engineer it, make sure everything works. All these designs, they're great, they're schematic, but do they actually work once you get into the deep engineering? So that'll be, fingers crossed, if we got that funding a year plus from now, we would go from there. And then again, we'd open it up for public process as we move through it, just to make sure we'll continue conversations with the butters to make sure that we have the phasing correctly and we address all of their concerns. One of the bonuses of having Jay involved in the process right now is he's looking at everything from a maintenance lens. So great points about the maintenance. He is not shy about saying, I don't want to take care of that. So we want to make sure that Jay is happy because then he'll take care of it. This is a great, generational opportunity. The last time this was done, it was in 1976. So here we are, we're revisiting this site. It's a great, well-loved site. It's a little urban oasis that we have in Concord, which is fantastic. It's one of the first places I went when I was thinking about moving to Concord. So this is our opportunity of what do we want to see it look like into the future? There's, it's kind of, some of the things are at the end of their life, so we have to fix them anyways. What do we want to do into the future? So 50 years from now, people are doing this again and they're thinking, hey, this group got together. Why did they make these decisions? We want to make the best decisions for Concord now. So as everybody mentioned, we'll be here lingering about. Feel free, we'll space ourselves out. Let us know more comments if you haven't shared them yet. Mark stuff up. marking stuff up is the way that we move to the next alternative. We can guess what you want, but if you have it actually written down, that really helps us make these decisions. So don't be shy, go up, mark stuff up. The precedent images that they've been showing are on the back table, so you can see them up close and actually see in more detail what they've been pointing to and showing. So mark those up as well as things that you like to see. So without that, we have a project page we'll put up on the city's website. We'll have the Concord TV video up if you want to share it with your friends and neighbors. We'll have the presentation up. My contact information will be on there. Beth Fenstermacher, you can find me in City Hall. Everybody knows where to find me at this point, I think. And thank you very much for coming out tonight. And please spread the word and get information out there. So thank you.